Your medication levels are dangerously low, Belliana. This shouldn't be possible. Dr. Reeves set the test results on the desk between us. I stared at the numbers. My hands felt cold against the armrests of the chair. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the sound seemed to grow louder with each passing second. "I've been taking my pills exactly as prescribed," I said quietly. 58 years old, 43 years of living with epilepsy. I knew my body. I knew my medication. "Show me your bottle," Dr. Reeves said, not unkindly. I pulled the amber plastic from my purse. My seizure medication. The same prescription I'd filled every month for 2 decades at the same pharmacy. Dr. Reeves opened it, held it up to the light, and something shifted in his expression. He set it down slowly. "This isn't normal medication, Belliana. The viscosity is wrong. The color is off. I think someone has been diluting this. With water, most likely." The room tilted. I reached for the desk edge. Steadied myself. My son, Marcus, had been staying with me for 3 months. He'd moved back home after his marriage fell apart, and I'd welcomed him without hesitation. A mother does that. You don't ask questions when your child needs you. You just open your door. But someone had been in my medicine cabinet. My seizures had been increasing over the past 2 months. Small ones at first, a flutter in my chest. A moment of disorientation in the grocery store. Then bigger ones. 3 weeks ago, I'd had a full grand mal seizure in my kitchen at 2 a.m. Marcus had found me there. He'd called the ambulance. He'd ridden with me to the hospital, held my hand in the emergency room, promised he'd help me manage my medications better. "We need to report this," Dr. Reeves said. His voice sounded very far away. I couldn't speak. My mind was moving through the rooms of my house, cataloging moments. Marcus refilling my water glass. Marcus asking if I'd taken my morning pill. Marcus standing in the bathroom doorway while I showered, saying he was just checking on me. Marcus's hands, which had held mine in the hospital, which had pushed the diluted medication into my mouth with such careful concern. The realization didn't come as a shock. It came as a slow, creeping certainty that I'd been ignoring the obvious for months. I drove home in silence. The afternoon sun cut through the windshield at a harsh angle. My hands on the steering wheel were steady now, but my mind was racing through possibilities. Why would Marcus do this? What could he possibly gain from making me sick? The house was quiet when I arrived. I stood in the foyer, listening. No television, no music, no sound of movement from upstairs. I walked to the kitchen and found a note on the counter in Marcus's handwriting. "Mom, I'm out for the evening. There's leftover chicken in the fridge. Love you? Love you." I set the note down carefully. My fingers felt numb. I climbed the stairs to his room. The door was closed. I'd never been someone who invaded my children's privacy, but this was different. This was my life. This was my health being systematically compromised. The room was neat, organized, a laptop on the desk, a stack of bills. I opened the desk drawer and found what I was looking for almost immediately: a journal. Marcus's handwriting filled the pages. I sat on his bed and began to read. The first entry was dated 6 months ago. "Mom's estate is worth at least $1.2 million. The house alone is worth $800K. She's only 58. She could live another 30 years. I can't wait that long. I'm drowning in debt. The divorce is destroying me. I need to find another way." My stomach contracted. I kept reading. "I've been researching seizure medications. They're powerful. If I can increase her seizure frequency, make her more dependent on me, I can eventually become her power of attorney. Medical crises create opportunities. I just need to be patient." The pages went on. Detailed notes about my medication. calculations about dilution ratios, references to websites about inducing medical emergencies, lists of my assets, projected timelines for when I might become incapacitated enough to need a guardian. I sat very still on his bed. The journal lay open on my lap. Outside, the afternoon light was fading. I could hear a neighbor's dog barking. A car driving past. The normal sounds of a normal evening. But nothing was normal anymore. My son had been poisoning me, not with something that would cause an obvious death. That would be too simple, too easily detected. He was using my own medication against me. He was weaponizing my illness. He was turning my seizures, the thing I'd fought against my entire adult life, into a tool for his own gain. I heard his car in the driveway an hour later. I was sitting in the living room with the journal on the coffee table. I'd made a copy of every page with my phone. I'd emailed them to myself. I'd called Dr. Reeves back and told him to preserve all my medical records. I'd called the police non-emergency line and asked to speak with someone about medication tampering. Marcus came through the door with his usual easy smile. He was carrying takeout containers. Thai food from the place downtown that he knew I loved. "Mom, I got your favorite, pad thai with extra peanuts. I figured we could have a quiet night in." He set the food on the kitchen counter without looking at me. I stood up, walked to the kitchen. "Marcus." He turned. His smile faltered when he saw my face. "We need to talk about my medication." His expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. A moment of calculation. Then he recovered. "What about it? Are you having more seizures? I've been worried about you." "Someone has been diluting my seizure medication with water." He laughed. It sounded genuine. It sounded practiced. "That's crazy, Mom." "Who would do that?" "I don't know. Why don't you tell me?" I watched him carefully. I'd spent 58 years reading people's faces. I'd learned to recognize the micro-expressions that came before lies. I saw it now. The slight tightening around his eyes. The way his jaw clenched for just a fraction of a second. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said, but his hand went to his pocket. He pulled out his phone. His fingers moved across the screen. He was deleting something, destroying evidence. "Dr. Reeves tested my medication. He confirmed it's been diluted. He's reporting it to the authorities." Marcus's face went very pale. "You what?" "I'm calling the police. I'm pressing charges. I'm asking you to leave this house right now." He stared at me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then something shifted in him. The pretense fell away. His face hardened into something I didn't recognize. "You have no proof," he said coldly. "It's your word against mine. And you're a woman with a seizure disorder who's been having increased medical episodes. Who do you think people will believe?" "I have your journal. I have copies of every entry. I have Dr. Reeves's analysis of your medication. I have phone records showing you researching seizure medication side effects and power of attorney procedures." His face flushed red. "You went through my private things?" "You were poisoning me, Marcus." "My privacy rights ended when you started compromising my health." He moved toward me. For a moment, I thought he might hurt me. My heart rate spiked. My hands went rigid at my sides, but he stopped short of me. He stood there, breathing hard, his face twisted with something that looked like rage and desperation mixed together. "I needed that money," he said. His voice was different now, stripped of its careful control. "Do you know what it's like to be drowning? To lose everything? The divorce took everything. My job laid me off. I have nothing. And you're sitting here in this house worth nearly $1 million, and you're not even using it. You're just living here alone, wasting it. So you decided to poison me? I decided to take what I deserve. I'm your son. I'm supposed to inherit this eventually anyway. I was just speeding up the timeline. The words hung in the air between us. I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. Something deeper. A fundamental trust that I'd carried my entire life. The belief that family meant something. That blood meant something. Get out, I said. My voice was steady. Pack your things and leave. Right now. Mom. Now, Marcus. He stared at me for another long moment. Then he turned and walked up the stairs. I heard him moving around his room, throwing things into a bag. 20 minutes later, he came back down with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. At the door, he paused. You're going to regret this, he said. When you're old and alone and sick, you're going to wish you'd let me help you. I'd rather die than let you near me again. He left. I locked the door behind him and didn't move for a long time. The police arrived the next morning. Detective Sarah Chen was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a notebook that never left her hands. I gave her the journal. I gave her the copies I'd made. I gave her the empty medication bottle and the full one that Dr. Reeves had prepared for me. This is serious, she said, reading through the entries. This isn't just medication tampering. This is premeditated fraud. He was planning to obtain power of attorney under false medical circumstances. That's elder abuse. That's conspiracy. That's attempted theft. I sat at my kitchen table and watched her work. The same kitchen where Marcus had made me tea just days ago. The same kitchen where he'd asked how I was feeling, whether my medication was working well, whether I needed anything from the store. Do you want to press charges? Detective Chen asked. I said yes, without hesitation. The arrest happened 3 days later. Marcus was taken into custody at his friend's apartment across town. He was charged with medication tampering, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. The prosecutor told me that the journal entries were devastating evidence. They showed clear premeditation. They showed calculation and planning. My daughter, Keisha, flew in from Portland the moment I called her. She arrived at my house at midnight, and when she walked through the door, she held me while I fell apart. I'd been holding myself together since the discovery. Holding myself together through the police interviews, the medical tests, the legal consultations. But when my daughter wrapped her arms around me, something inside me gave way. I didn't see it, I kept saying. How did I not see it? Because he's your son, Keisha said. Because you trusted him. Because you're a good mother, and good mothers don't assume the worst about their children. But I had assumed the worst. I'd gone through his things. I'd read his private thoughts. I'd turned him in to the police. The guilt and relief were tangled together so tightly I couldn't separate them. The court case took 6 months to resolve. During that time, I had to testify about my medical history, my seizure disorder, my medication regimen. I had to explain in detail how I'd discovered the tampering. I had to listen as Marcus's lawyer suggested that I was confused, that I might have made a mistake, that my medical condition might be affecting my memory. But the evidence was irrefutable. The journal entries were explicit. The medication analysis was conclusive. The phone records showed Marcus researching power of attorney procedures and seizure medication side effects on the same days he was refilling my water glass. Marcus pleaded guilty to all charges. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison. I sat in the courtroom and watched my son be led away in handcuffs. I felt nothing, or rather, I felt everything, and it all canceled out into a kind of numbness. Keisha stayed with me for 2 weeks after the sentencing. We didn't talk much about what had happened. Instead, we fell into the rhythms of normal life. We cooked together. We watched movies. We sat on the porch in the evenings and watched the sun set. She helped me reorganize my medication system. We installed a lock on my medicine cabinet. We changed all my passwords. When she left to go back to Portland, I drove her to the airport. She held my hand in the car. "You're going to be okay, Mom," she said. "You know that, right?" "I know. This wasn't your fault. I know that too." But knowing and feeling were different things. The first few weeks after Marcus left were the hardest. I was afraid to take my medication. Every time I swallowed a pill, I wondered if it was real, if it was safe, if I could trust my own body. I had nightmares about seizures that wouldn't stop. I woke up in the middle of the night convinced that I was having a medical emergency. Dr. Reeves prescribed me a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, and she specialized in trauma. We met every Thursday afternoon in a small office that smelled like lavender. For the first few sessions, I couldn't talk about what had happened. I just sat there and cried. "This is a betrayal, Doctor," Okonkwo said gently. "Not just of your trust, but of the fundamental relationship between a parent and child. That's profound. That's worth grieving." Slowly, I began to process what had happened. I began to understand that Marcus's actions weren't about me. They were about his own desperation, his own failures, his own inability to cope with his circumstances. That didn't excuse what he'd done, but it helped me separate his choices from my worth as a mother. I'd done everything right. I'd loved him. I'd supported him. I'd welcomed him home when he was struggling. And he'd repaid that love with calculated betrayal. That was his choice. That was his character. That wasn't a reflection of my failure. 3 months after the sentencing, I made a decision. I was going to sell the house. The same house that Marcus had wanted so badly. The same house he'd been willing to poison me to obtain. I couldn't live here anymore. Every room held the memory of his deception. Every corner held the evidence of his plotting. I hired a real estate agent. I packed up my things. I found a small apartment in a different neighborhood. Modern, bright, no history, no ghosts. The house sold in 2 weeks. The buyer was a young family with 2 children. They were excited about the potential. They talked about renovations and new paint colors. I handed over the keys without looking back. With the proceeds from the sale, I paid off my remaining mortgage. I set aside money for my medical care. I established a scholarship fund in my name at the local university. I donated to epilepsy research organizations. I did everything I could to transform the money that Marcus had wanted so desperately into something meaningful. A year after Marcus's arrest, I was sitting in my apartment on a Tuesday morning when I received a letter. It was from Marcus. He was writing from prison. His handwriting was different now, smaller, less confident. "Dear Mom," the letter began. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I understand what I did. I've been in therapy here. I've been reading about the impact of my actions. I've been trying to understand how I became someone capable of poisoning his own mother. I don't have a good answer. I just know that I was selfish and desperate and cruel. I know that I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. I know that I hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't expect this letter to change anything. I just needed you to know." I read the letter 3 times. Then I set it down on my kitchen table and didn't read it again for 6 months. When I did read it again, something had shifted inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of acceptance. Marcus had made terrible choices. Those choices had consequences, and I had survived them. I was still here. I was still healthy. I was still myself. I wrote him back. I didn't write about forgiveness. I wrote about what I'd learned. I wrote about the importance of asking for help instead of taking what you think you deserve. I wrote about the damage that desperation can do to a person's character. I wrote about hope. I wrote that I hoped he would use his time in prison to become a better person. I wrote that I hoped he would eventually understand the gravity of what he'd done. I wrote that I hoped he would find a way to make amends, even if it was just to himself. I didn't know if my letter would matter, but I sent it anyway. 2 years after Marcus's arrest, I was diagnosed with a new medication that was more effective for my seizures. The new treatment plan was working well. My seizure frequency had decreased significantly. I was sleeping better. I was feeling more like myself. I started volunteering at a local epilepsy support group. I told my story to other people with seizure disorders. I talked about the importance of medication compliance, but also about the reality that medication can sometimes be compromised. I talked about the importance of having trusted people in your life who could help monitor your health. One of the women in the group was a young mother named Tamara. She'd been having similar experiences to mine. Increased seizure frequency despite taking her medication as prescribed. Confusion about whether her medication was working. She'd been blaming herself, wondering if she was doing something wrong. When I told her my story, she cried. She hugged me. She said, "You're not crazy. You're not imagining this. And it's not your fault." I realized then that my story had value, that by surviving this, by processing it, by sharing it, I could help other people. I could help them understand that betrayal wasn't always obvious, that poison could come in the form of someone you loved, that it was possible to recover from that kind of violation. I started writing about my experience. I wrote essays for online publications. I was interviewed by a journalist who was writing about elder abuse. My story was published in a magazine that focused on health and wellness. People reached out to me. They shared their own stories of betrayal. They asked for advice. They thanked me for speaking up. 3 years after Marcus's arrest, I received a notification that he'd been granted parole. He'd served half his sentence. He'd completed every rehabilitation program available to him. He'd written letters of apology to the prison chaplain. He was being released. I didn't go to the parole hearing. I didn't need to. I'd already made peace with whatever happened next. Marcus was no longer my responsibility. His choices were no longer my burden. He was a separate person, living a separate life, and I was free of him. On the day of his release, I was at the epilepsy support group meeting. I was telling a new member about the importance of keeping your medication in a secure location. I was sharing resources for people who suspected medication tampering. I was living my life. Moving forward. Keisha called me that evening. "Did you hear?" she asked. "Hear what?" "Marcus was released today. He's going to be staying with his friend in the city for a while. The parole officer is monitoring him. He has restrictions." "Okay," I said, and I meant it. It was okay. It was just information. It didn't change anything about my life. "Are you going to see him?" Keisha asked. "No." "Are you angry?" I thought about that. Was I angry? I'd been angry for so long. Angry at Marcus for his betrayal. Angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Angry at the world for allowing this to happen. But anger was exhausting. Anger was a poison of its own kind. "No," I said. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done." Today, 4 years after the discovery, I'm sitting in my apartment with a cup of tea and a clear mind. My seizures are well controlled. My medication is secure. My life is full of meaning and purpose. I volunteer regularly. I write regularly. I speak regularly about my experience. I've learned that betrayal doesn't define you, that survival is its own form of victory, that a mother's love is strong enough to survive even the cruelest of betrayals. I've learned that asking for help is not weakness, that protecting yourself is not selfishness, that moving forward is not forgetting. Marcus is out there somewhere, living his life under parole restrictions. I don't think about him often. When I do, I feel a kind of sadness for the person he became. But I don't feel responsible for his choices. I don't feel guilty for protecting myself. I don't feel obligated to forgive him. What I feel is gratitude. Gratitude that I survived. Gratitude that I had the strength to recognize what was happening. Gratitude that I had the courage to act. Gratitude that my daughter stood by me. Gratitude that I can now use my experience to help others. If you're in a situation where you suspect someone is tampering with your medication or your health, please speak up. Please get help. Please trust your instincts. Your life is worth protecting. Your health is worth fighting for. You are worth more than anyone's desperation or greed. Hit follow if this hit close to home.